As most of you know by now, because it's all over the place, on November 1st, which is in a few days, the SNAP or the food stamp program will cease to exist. But I also realize that a lot of people who are making videos on this issue don't know the history of the SNAP slash food stamp program. The first idea was in 1933, and the first food stamp was issued in 1939. The idea behind the program was to use excess food that the farmers had to feed poor people during the Great Depression. Now, by law, every citizen within the US qualified for this program. However, due to racism in the South, people of color were not granted access to the program. This changed in 1964 when Lyndon B. Johnson reauthorized the program after it was partially reinstated by John F. Kennedy. Even after 1964, black people were still, in some cases, marginally excluded from access to the program. It wasn't until 1970, following a whole bunch of lawsuits and the Civil Rights Act, that forced states to include people of color to access the food stamp program. Why am I saying this? Because the agency that's responsible for administering the food stamp program is the USDA, or the United States Department of Agriculture. And their most recent data, showed 36% of white people use SNAP programs. Most of them are located in red states. 26% of African Americans use the SNAP program, and 16% of Hispanics use the SNAP program. Asians only use 4%, and Native American use anywhere between 1 and 2%. What I'm trying to get across here, the true beneficiary of the SNAP program are Trump supporters in red rural areas. This is important because the Trump administration is making the claim that the reason they are not paying food stamps program on November 1st is because the government has no money, because the government is shut down. That is not true. The reason they're not paying for it is because of racism and cruelty. There is this false narrative that the true beneficiary of the SNAP program are people of color, particularly black people and immigrants. There is also a false narrative that mainly black women benefits disproportionately from the SNAP program. Based on the data I just told you, we know this to be incorrect. The other reason why they're doing this is because the Trump administration needs to find a way to pay for the $1 trillion tax break he gave to his rich friends. And typical of not only the Trump administrations, but Republican administration, they tend to squeeze the poor to pay the rich. This is nothing new. Every Republican administration does the exact same thing. And it's not that they don't have the money to pay SNAP benefits on November 1st. They absolutely do. Because the USDA has an emergency fund account. They could easily use the money, which is in the billions of dollars, to pay SNAP benefits on November 1st. But they will not do that. because the idea here is cruelty for the poor, particularly black people and people of brown skin. The second option the USDA has is the authority to relocate funds to pay the SNAP program. Yes, Congress gave them the authority many, many years ago to reallocate funds to comply with the SNAP law. This is a choice that the Trump administration is making. And to further highlight this, the administration said a few days ago, when some states suggested they may step in and fill the gap left vacant by the Trump administration. The USDA said if any state were to step in to pay the SNAP benefits, those states will not be reimbursed. That simple statement tells you this is not a question about money. This has nothing to do with the government shutdown. This has to do with cruelty and racism. Another thing I want you to consider. This country has always had government shutdown for as long as I can recall. It's either every 6 months there is a threat, or the government shuts down probably every 18 months. You know what's always been paid during that shutdown? The SNAP program. Yeah. All of a sudden, this time they don't have money to pay. The money is there. They just don't want to pay. They want to make the poor people hurt because they don't care about poor folks. What they do care about is building a stupid ballroom. There is also this new thing I saw on my streaming service where people are saying, why should I care what the users of SNAP program spent their money on? Again, this statement, while true, reflects a lack of historical understanding of the program. In the 90s, people were given direct money into their bank accounts. What the data showed was most of the money were being used to buy cigarettes. And then it got really bad to where people actually built a business around reselling food stamps. Now, the government spend a lot of money on a lot of crap, and the last thing people need to be worried about or concerned about or making an issue about is what someone spend $300 on. However, personally, if I'm going to give you part of my tax dollar to put food on your table and you use it to buy a vape pen or you use it to buy a cigarette, I have a problem with that. Because if you can use that money to do that, then you should probably get a job to make some extra money to pay for your habits. Speaking of jobs, the other lie that conservatives normally tell is most people on food stamps or on the SNAP program isn't working. They are working. Most of them are. However, big corporations such as Walmart and other retail giants, Amazon, has figured out a way to game the system. Most of them limit the amount of working hours they give to their employees to prevent them from having to pay health care, to keep them below the poverty line, thus ensuring they qualify for the food stamp program or the supplemental nutrition program, as it's called, SNAP. Okay? So this is a corporate issue also. Don't let them fool you with all the nonsense they're trying to sell you. This is an entirely preventable thing. This is a race-based cruelty attack on poor people, support the rich people agenda of this administration.